I think it helps to have a context in which there is a God, right, who is all-knowing and in whom ultimate truth resides, and it's not from you, right? It's not up to us. It's not
I
in
agree,
us.
but I mean, I don't know. Most of my life, I haven't spent thinking about God. I do now, but I mean, most of my life I didn't.
Yeah.
But I don't know, just trying to be honest with myself. It was always pretty clear to me that I didn't really know anything and that nobody does. And if you don't know that, then you're dangerous.
Yeah, this is just pure speculation. I guess I'm just trying to, especially now that I teach at a medical school and I've been in academia for now almost 2 decades. Those kind of humble, humble approaches are not rewarded in these structures, right? In these systems. What is rewarded is saying, I've got the answer, right? Or I'm on my way to finding the answer. I've got this new piece of information about this. That's one of the reasons I think that so many theologians, at least in my world, have reacted negatively to this sort of publish or perish, come up with new ideas constantly, sort of a model of higher education. Because, boy, oh boy, if we're truly exhibiting the virtue of humility in the way you suggest, we need to make far fewer claims about the kinds of things that we do, precisely because we need to start with the virtue of humility first. And
well, right. And in a system that actually wanted to expand knowledge and perpetuate it, pass it on, there would be much more reading and much less writing.
That's right.
Much more listening, much less talking. And it seems the opposite.
That's absolutely true. There's a tremendous amount of pressure put on academics and including those in academic medicine to just publish your ass off, right? And just get paper after paper out there. And we have, as you know, a replication crisis now, in part because of this.
Can you explain for people who don't follow what that is?
So, in part, but not only, because of the intense pressure on academics and especially in academic medicine to advance one's career through publications, there's been a real lack of humility in sort of sitting with data and books and studies and an attempt to sort of just push things out and get your name out there and get your publications out there. And then when people come behind them, and it's actually more and more difficult for people to come behind them because there's not a lot of glory in either confirming what somebody's already published or there's some glory in finding that they were wrong about it, but not a lot of people spend a lot of time trying to confirm or replicate studies. But when they do, we now have found a replication crisis that a lot of these...
But replication is not just like a virtue, it's a prerequisite for science.
That's right.
It's a basic scientific precept.
That's
if
right.
You're going to make a claim, in order for us to declare it true, it has to be replicated. That's
right. And it's a deep and foundational problem that especially in areas which are ideologically charged, let's say, the replication crisis is particularly profound. So it's not just about publish or perish, get a ton of articles out there to advance your career. It's also to get the right kind of articles out there, the ones that say the right things, that have the right conclusions about some of the issues we've been discussing so far on the show, right? These are politically charged things, and in order to get it published in the best journals, you probably need to have the quote unquote right answer as well.
That seems like total corruption.
There's corruption. I mean, there's absolutely no doubt about it. I mean, I experienced this even in my own world of bioethics, where you just sort of know what journals you need to submit to if you have a particular sort of argument and a sort of conclusion. You say, well, I could submit it there, but it's never going to be published there. It doesn't matter how good the argument is. It doesn't really matter whether I've done good research or have adequately investigated this and I'm making very tight arguments. I have the wrong conclusion for that journal. And so you submit it to a different journal, right? Or you don't submit it at all, or you submit it to an online journal or something that might actually get read by people.
Just submit it to Twitter.
Yeah. I mean, that's increasingly where a lot of this is headed. Twitter has actually been one of the places where we've been able to most clearly see the replication crisis, right?
I was half joking, but what do you mean?
Well, I mean, so many of these things before Twitter and before social media happened on the down low, right? They would just be only the specialists would sort of know, like, oh, so-and-so, their article got retracted, or like so-and-so followed behind them and wasn't able to replicate their work, or, whatever. Now, as soon as that happens, happily, there's a place where you can go and see people saying, hey, look, this data was problematic. This data was faulty. And there's public pressure, in fact, to then have the journal address that and say, well, maybe this, we need to have a note here or something like that and address the problem. So that kind of transparency, which is only just a few years old now, I think we've yet to see the end result of that.
So I'm sorry, back to the topic that you were explaining before I once again so rudely sidetracked the conversation, which was brain death and a persistent vegetative state.
Right.
So when we left, you were explaining, I think, that there is no way or universally agreed upon way to measure whether or not a brain is dead.
I think that's right. We're trying to get ways, for instance, to do a better job testing for hypothalamic function, for instance, and brainstem function. But actually, one of the difficulties that is pushing us in ways that I find pretty disturbing about declaring somebody brain dead is a lot of people are sort of throwing up their hands and say, hey, it's actually pretty arbitrary how we test. Like, who cares whether we can test for the function of the hypothalamus? Who cares actually how much of the brain is dead? They're good. They're not the person they ever will be again, or something like this. So.
There is something in most people that kind of agrees with that, though. They don't want themselves or their loved ones living on a ventilator. Yes. And I think that's fair to say.
That's right. And getting back to one of our earlier discussions, it's perfectly legitimate to take somebody off a ventilator as long as one is not aiming at their own death, right? As long as it's a choice about how to live. If somebody says to me, and my parents, a friend, spouse, listen, Charlie, I would not want to be on a ventilator. So can you make sure I'm not living on a ventilator? It's not that I want to die in any particular moment. I just don't want to live my life that way.
Yes.
That's, again, to use the more fancy language, that's foreseeing, but not intending one's death, but making a choice about how to live rather than a choice to die. And we do that all the time, right? Even the food we eat, as your show has helpfully pointed out, is maybe a choice how to live. We can foresee if we eat or behave or exercise a certain way. These have certain outcomes, right? It's a choice about how to live, not a choice about how to die. So that's different from saying, quite different from saying, because you're on a ventilator and you don't have the requisite brain activity, you're dead, right? You're dead. Right. That's quite different. And so we can perfectly say, and we should say, and let me make this clear if I haven't already, we don't need to keep people alive indefinitely. In fact, this is not at all a Christian ethic. I mean, just look up at Christ on the cross. It's pretty obvious. You don't need to do everything to save your life, right? If we're imitating Christ, the early the church's martyrs also give a great example of this. It can be a very clear example of idolatry. In fact, to just pursue life, extended life.
I agree.
So I hope I'm making it clear that that's not what I'm saying, that we have to do everything. We should not do everything. We don't make an idol out of life. At the same time, we don't tell ourselves silly bedtime stories about individuals who gestate children or get their first period as being dead.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. We hope you'll subscribe to it. And by the way, you can hit the little bell on there and get notifications every time we produce a video. We hope you'll do that also.